Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, we just got to talk to Ryan Day for the first time since an Ohio State football loss, and everyone is taking everything great in the comments everywhere. So, yeah, pretty much status quo. I think everyone is good. I feel like there probably won't be any feedback on anything we talk about on today's show. Everyone's just going to kind of go thumbs up.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff.
I was surprised to find out that everybody, viewers, coaches, players have all moved on and everything is hunky-dory right now. That is, in fact, not what is happening. And we'll get into more of all of that moving forward. But first, let's start off with the injury confirmation news. Josh Simmons out for the season with a knee injury. Zen Michalski, who stepped in against Oregon, is now the guy there, and they need him to step up. He's had a week now of full week and plus of practice. He's a fourth-year guy. This is basically what he's been preparing for. Thought it was interesting. Will Howard talking. We also talked about with Will Howard, Ryan Day, and Will Howard. That's it today. Will Howard talked about encouraging Zen Michalski, building his confidence, but not doing it like you can't do it fake. Like you can't be great job on the getting the water. Like great job
right.
on
you can't talk to college football players the way we talk to Kevin. That's not.
And we're gonna put this one on the fridge.
Great job getting the show on the internet today.
Yeah,
we appreciate it. Good job.
Look at you
with a camera and a computer.
Wow. Yeah, you can't do it.
It's
got to be real, which is why you don't ever see us doing that.
He's still looking at me.
Why don't you step behind me? So they're going to go with Zen Michalski. They're still going to rotate guys in and out of that left tackle spot, which is what they do normally anyway. So if something happens and they need to go to somebody else, they'll have other guys with experience with snaps, experience with snaps. So that's the situation at left tackle right now.
That feels like potentially good news. If Zen Michalski is the starter at left tackle, to me, that's encouraging news for Ohio State, because we talked about this on, I think, one of the morning shows we did earlier in the week. If you have Zen Michalski and he's plan A, and then you see Donovan Jackson out there or Tigger Shabola or whoever at your left tackle spot for the first snap against Nebraska this weekend, that tells me, okay, plan A didn't work. So it doesn't necessarily mean Zen Michalski is going to be a first-team All-American if he's taken that first snap, but it feels like they have looked at things. They feel like that is the least disruptive way to handle it, and if he's out there, that's probably good news. It does go a little bit counter to their typical approach, though, of five best, because I don't think there's any point during the previous 6 months where you would have looked at the offensive line room on the whole and said, if one of these guys goes out, Zen Michalski is one of the five best.
Yeah, and we've never had him in there, and he's not been Austin Searveld mixing in being one of the top six linemen playing, and so they're going away from that. But you can understand the reasoning for that, especially if you're one of the people who are like, I don't agree with the five best, because you need the best left tackle, and you need the best guy, the best blindside guy, and they believe right now that's Zen Michalski. We'll see how it goes. The real evidence will be on the field in the games, and if things don't go well in the game, they'll change some things and see how it goes. But as they said, you're the fact that he's been working for years against Ohio State's defensive ends. Say what you want.
Don't worry, I haven't even looked at the comments. I'm sure they are.
But you're getting some work there. So that's the left tackle situation. I asked Ryan Day about the rumor about Lathan Ransom being injured, and he said, I'm not going to talk about any other injuries. I'm not going to talk about injuries at this point, even though he'd already just talked about the Josh Simmons, but he didn't want to talk about anything further. Then he did later on mention that Will Kazmarek's going to be out for a while. Quinshon Judkins is fine, but didn't want to address anything with the Lathan Ransom thing, which isn't that addressing it by proxy?
More or less. If there's nothing to it, then Quinshon Judkins is fine. That's a very easy thing to address. If Lathan Ransom's fine, then it's very easy to address it. And he did ultimately later go into. So hypothetically, if you had to get into your depth at safety, what would that look like? And there are a couple possible answers there. One of them is you've got Jalen McLean, you've got Malik Hartford. Both of those guys have looked good in limited action this year. They've been good, but there's a question as to exactly how much that means. And then there's also the possibility of, hey, you've got Sonny Styles, hey, you've got Jordan Hancock. Do you make a move?
Lorenzo
Styles. You've got a, do you make a move somewhere there in terms of that? There was not a real hard and fast answer. I think the fact that the first thing he said was about Jalen McLean and Malik Hartford, that to me suggests that's going to certainly be their first choice in terms of how you address it, because much like keeping Zen Michalski at left tackle, then you don't screw up anything else. Then you're not, if you move Jordan Hancock to one of the deep safety spots, well, then you've got to make another change somewhere else. If you can solve the problem with one change instead of two, that's probably your better option.
Yeah, and safety has so many moving parts as it is. And so if they did move Jordan Hancock, here's the thing with the nickel has to also be able to play safety based on the motion of a receiver. They'll sometimes get moved to a deep safety. So he has that capability. But do you put him at free safety? And if you do, then Caleb Downs goes to strong safety.
Yeah, then you're making free choice at changes.
And I think they're deep enough at nickel with Jermaine Matthews, with Lorenzo Styles Jr., that maybe they look at that. But like you said, the first two answers were Jalen McLean and Malik Hartford. In terms of, Dan Hope followed up my question. He's like, so if anything ever happens at safety, what's the depth there? And he talked about Jalen McLean and Malik Hartford. And then it was suggested, well, could you also perhaps move a nickel? I was like, yeah, they have that flexibility. I think Jalen McLean, we know, has been one of the guys we talked about way in the offseason in the spring, and how often he was around the ball and all of that stuff. I don't think they want a freshman out there. We saw Malik Hartford out there last year as a true freshman, and they yanked that chain pretty quickly because of against Youngstown State, missing a play. So I think maybe you try that, but I would expect if anything is happening with Lathan Ransom, I would expect ultimately to be a veteran-based secondary, especially in a safety-driven defense.
Right, and that's a phrase. We haven't heard that phrase as much this year, which is interesting to me, but the safety play has been very good, very reliable, and I don't think we have a timetable on a potential Lathan Ransom injury, which if this is a 2-week thing, that's probably a different conversation than a 6-week thing, which is a different conversation than a season-ending thing.
Correct.
So we'll see how that all potentially shakes out. But yeah, this is a program where you brought in Will Howard to reduce the volatility at the quarterback position. You need someone he doesn't have to be a superstar, but he has to just sort of be reliable. That's kind of the same approach I'm expecting them to take at the safety position. What can you do to raise the floor at the safety position and not have boom explosive plays all over the place? Because we've seen that from Ohio State safeties at various times in the past. I'm just thinking back to the Marcus Hooker year and the Isaiah Pryor year, and you just need to not have that. And maybe that's Jordan Hancock because he is a more veteran guy. Maybe now that Malik Hartford, too many Maliks now. Malik H's. No, that's too obvious. M Hartford. Maybe he is, now that he's not a freshman, he's had another year in the system, he's gone through the full spring, all that kind of stuff. Maybe that ends up being something. But they don't need Caleb Downs part 2. They need the floor to be raised to eliminate, you don't get gashed on big plays. That's kind of the single biggest piece there.
And Malik Hartford started twice, I believe, last year as a true freshman. It's just interesting that the first name is Jalen McLean.
Yeah. Well,
how much do you read into that?
He's more of the boundary guy, the bandit, which is where Ransom plays. Hartford has been more of the adjuster, deep safety kind of guy this year, which is where Caleb Downs has played. So, Hartford being or McLean being the first name out, I don't know if I chalk that up to, we're talking about potentially replacing the bandit. So there, before you look at the next guy on that depth chart, or maybe we're reading not enough into it.
But that's basically all we can do. We'll be back here Wednesday night, and it'll be interesting to see exactly who looks like they've been practicing. Although all the time we see injured players that are all completely dressed and they walk in for practice, and it's like you can't tell if they've been practicing or not. So that may not tell us as much as we hope. But so that's that situation. The tight end situation, I think it's you saw how it's going to play out on last against Oregon. Will Kazmarek out, then you bring in Bennett Christian to take over so many of those snaps. They need him to step up. Jelani Thurman, of course, needs to step up. They're getting plenty of opportunities in practice right now, so they're getting all of the work they need. And we covered all of the injury news. Quinshon Judkins is fine, according to Ryan Day, and he was not impacted at Oregon by anything going on.
Yeah, the fumble, he was more or less directly asked about the fumble, and was that the hand and factor in that? He said, no, that was not something that was a cause there. So
let's talk about the Ryan Day defensive head coach. Ryan Day was asked if he's getting more involved with the defense now. And every now and again, when there's a situation with the defense, and Ohio State has had offensive coaches throughout our lives other than the 1 year with Luke Fickell, and it's like, so when things aren't going well, hey, are you getting more involved in the defensive side of things? And it's always a yep. And this week it's like, yep, Ryan Day is more involved with the defense than he's been since he's been here, and things have been much worse. I don't know that's actually, I don't know that he actually said those words, but he's been involved a lot more than previously this year for sure. And that's, in the meetings, that's feedback, that's, wanting. Somebody asked, are you telling them what changes you want, or are you just listening? And he's like, a bit of both.
Yeah, it feels like there's a decent amount of input there. And you've seen this in other places in college football this year. I mean, Ryan Walters, who is a defensive head coach at Purdue, was calling plays essentially the last couple of weeks. One of those weeks they put up 49 points. One of those weeks they put up 0 points. So
pretty good average.
How has it worked? Little of both.
Well, he's a defensive coordinator.
He is a defensive coordinator.
He pitched a shutout.
He did, yes. A monkey paws curl somewhere, yes. It's interesting. Very clearly, I think, number one takeaway, I think there's a lot. Ryan Day is trying not to say too much, and he's trying not to throw anyone under the bus, and he's trying to sort of portray the idea that everyone's on the same page, and basically said, when they walked out of the room, everyone was on the same page. So, okay, I guess. So then, how long did it take to get everyone on the same page? In what way were people not on the same page? And that's the kind of question this got asked like 4 or 5 different ways. There are times when, people are going to say, people aren't doing their jobs, they're not asking the right questions. It's like, you can ask the same question, you can come at it from different angles and sometimes get a different answer. But if you don't want to get, if the coach doesn't want to get into stuff, you don't, this is not a police interrogation. You can't just, turn on the lights and pound the table, and that doesn't work that way. But I think the big takeaway from this is they recognize this is an issue, and they are doing their best to address the issue. I am going to be very interested to see what changes this week. People are talking about, and this is something we've talked to Ross about a bunch on morning shows, more twists, more stunts, more, not just being 4 rush guys. Because Day was asked about Nick Saban's comments about the defense being antiquated. I thought he had an interesting answer on that.
Yeah, really good answer. He's like, well, if it's not effective, then he's right. Basically, like if the defense isn't getting home when they need to get home, then how can you really argue with that thought? If they're not producing, then any kind of criticism you want to throw at them is going to stick. It's one thing if they're, it's 7 sacks last week and Nick Saban's like, it's antiquated. I'd be like, did you see? But that's not how it's going. And we saw on Twitter, you posted on the Buckeye Huddle message board about the top 2 pass rushers, pass rush rates in the Big Ten being Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau.
And the context around that was brackets, pulls pin, rolls tweet into thread, comma, walks out, close brackets.
Like, and I retweet it, and people are like, this is fake. This cannot be real. And it's one thing to create pressure. It's another thing to get home. Ryan Day wants them to get home, and they're not doing that. And so if you're getting pressure just by doing basics, maybe then you would get home by just maybe adding a little more zazz.
Is that a technical term?
It's a technical term.
Normally, we only get really the really technical stuff when Ross is on the show.
No,
Are we sponsored by Jeff Ruby's Columbus today because of your
a little more zazz?
A little more zazz, yeah. And it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of zazz do they add. It's going to look different. I feel reasonably confident that it's going to look different in some way this week. How different and in what way is it different is really the interesting question to me, because there's certain stuff that I think people are they want to see 3 down. If you haven't been doing 3 down this year, that's not something you can just install in a week. You're not going to install a whole new defense where now it's a 3-4 or it's a 3-3-5. That's not something, if you haven't been doing a bunch of that this year, that's not something you can just change overnight. You can, twists and stunts and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm sure they've been doing some of it. So I'm sure you're going to see more of that. I don't know. This is another one of the things I'm going to be interested to talk to Ross about, where it seems like that should be a relatively elementary thing to, okay, you're going to just change stuff, but there's a bunch of technical stuff. Who goes first? Does the end go first? Does the tackle go first when you're running a stunt or a loop or whatever? There's a bunch of that kind of stuff that's going to probably be a little more complicated to add in than you might think just sort of looking at the surface. I'm going to be fascinated to see what they add in and how much they add it in, because I don't think you need to be running stunts and twists on every play, but if you're doing it just more, it's like sim pressures. We talk about those all the time. If you're doing just sim pressures, sometimes that keeps you honest too.
Well, how much do you need to do against a true freshman quarterback is another thing. Dylan Raiola for Nebraska, like how much, that is one thing where you can show them a bunch of different things and just change the picture as the play is going on, and maybe you get them. So maybe some of the token stuff and the sim pressures will be more effective against him than they would be next time against Dylan Gabriel or whatever. But the Nick Saban thing, and I'm just going through some of these things about how he did say, like, there needs to be a change. And at some point I was looking for it. He mentioned, like, you can't just rush 4 all the time. And I couldn't remember didn't hear the exact quote because I think somebody was talking to me, or there's a noise happens and it's like, oh, what exactly was that? But I'm with you. I'm interested to see what this looks like, what else they do, how aggressive do they get, but also how easy can you replicate it? How effective is it? How organic is it as part of the defense? A bunch of different ways to go about it. And that was one of the other things they said. It's like you can get pressure a lot of different ways. And it's something we talked about in one of the morning shows recently. Like if you have a bad offense, it's by choice. If you can't get pressure, that's also by choice because you're not doing enough to scheme it up. So we'll see how those changes are. We know everybody talks about on the message boards on Twitter about Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles not being on the same page. Ryan Day was asked directly, and the answer that you knew was coming came, and the answer is yes, they're on the same page.
Yeah,
and it was kind of what you said about how everybody leaves the room on the same page, but while you're in the room, everybody's throwing stuff out there.
Right. Yeah, and then how who's throwing what out, and is this all sort of incorporated into baby, you got a stew going, you're just throwing everything in the pot? Or is this everyone has their say and then we're doing what that guy said? That's all stuff that we didn't get, and you're not going to get an answer. You could kind of walk in to the building today and know, here's stuff you're going to get an answer on, here's stuff you're not going to get an answer on, and here's the answer you're going to get on something where you're going to ask it and it's going to be, well, sort of, eventually. And that's, I know that's frustrating for people at home, and that's, I think everyone would love to have a, sodium pentothal episode of the midweek interviews at some point, but that's probably not going to happen.
What I do appreciate, because we knew the answer that Ryan Day was going to give about the same page, but then he expounded. Yeah, and he went into great detail on a bunch of different things rather than just saying, no, we're fine, everything. Right, it's all fine. Yeah, and. Please disperse. Yeah, and he's, I have done morning shows with Dan Lanning and Matt Rule. The Matt Rule Nebraska morning show is going up a little later on in the afternoon. You're going to enjoy that one. Matt Rule is someone we look forward to talking to at Big Ten Media Days every year, because he is very straightforward. And whatever issues Ryan Day has, he did not lose by 49 points last time out. So
Matt Rule's dealing with bigger issues as well.
Indiana's coming.
Indiana. If you'd like to give me Ohio State plus 48.5, I will take that.
I need the extra 3 points because of the home.
Oh, true. Yeah, well, we'll negotiate later. My bold prediction: Ohio State covers 45.5. You get a broad spectrum of coaches' answer. Dan Lanning gives you 6-second answers, and he's being snippy.
Unless he wins,
and then he talks a long time, and he talks. Maybe we'll make a transition here. He talks about calls that he doesn't agree with, and that was something that, and he talked about the Will Kazmarek fumble, and was it a fumble? Was it not a fumble? And they thought it was a fumble, and they missed the call, and it cost them a touchdown. Yada yada yada. That because he won, everyone looks at that and goes, "Yeah, sure, fine." Ryan Day was asked directly about, "Hey, the last play, did you send that into the Big Ten?" And he said yes, and they were told no. The call was, he was not down in time. The timeout call was not made in time, and everything blew up as soon as that went on boards and Twitter and everywhere else. And Ryan Day is such a baby, and Ryan Day is crying day, and all this stuff. I feel like this is one of these times when we need to provide some context for people, where we talk to Bill Carollo, the Big Ten's director of officiating, at Big Ten Media Days every year. One of our favorite interviews every year. And one of the things he talked about is that every week, every coach in the Big Ten sends in, "Hey, here was this holding call. Here was this pass interference call. It was called against us. Should it have been? It was not called against them. Should it have been?" This is a routine part of the week. They spend time. Bill Carollo has time during his day on Sunday blocked out for. We're getting all these videos.
They want the coaches to send this stuff.
They want the stuff. So there was this, immediate sore loser, what a baby. This is a routine part of the game week process for every coach in the Big Ten. If you were if you were another team's fan base and saying what a baby, guess what? Your team's coach does it too, because they want them to do it. And and he was asked about it today. So why are you still talking about that? Well, because we haven't talked to Ryan Day since we were in Eugene, Oregon at the end of that game, because they didn't do any interviews last week. So that's why he was asked about it. It was the first chance to get asked about it. So he was asked about it.
Well, and the reason he's asked about it is because you can see the picture of Will Howard sliding, which the play is over with 1 second left on the clock. You can see Brandon Ennis signaling a timeout. Ryan Day is signaling a timeout. Like, all of this is happening with 1 second on the clock. The Big Ten said there's no time. If there's no time on the clock, they wouldn't have set that in.
Right.
But the fact that there is, and again, the Big Ten, Bill Carollo wants all of this stuff. It's the only way to make everything better, make the refs better. Like, let's see our flaws so that we can correct them. Now, you won't get to talk to anybody about these things.
Right. Yeah.
This is like a Georgia punishment. It'll all be handled internally.
So the clock was speeding, is what I'm hearing.
Well, I mean, it was a little fast.
And, just to be clear, I'm still going to lean on our conversation about this after the game. That's not the reason they lost the game. I mean, that's not, you can't
still got to make the field goal after that.
You have to make the field goal. And did he slide, could he have slid a second earlier? If he slides a second earlier and then you've got time to make the call, sure. Could you technically have probably looked at a frame by frame? Yes. Is that something you're going to expect them to do on the field while there's 10,000 Oregon fans storming the field? Probably not. But.
If the roles were reversed and this was Dylan Gabriel in Oregon, in Autzen Stadium, sliding, do you think there would have been a replay? Because there are no fans on the field. Do you remember what happened last year at Notre Dame?
Yes.
And there was a replay with 1 second left in no time, and they put a second back on.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess what we've learned in college football is you can throw either garbage or fans on the field and get your way.
Nothing truer has ever been said on the show. Kevin, do we have any questions we want to get to?
We do. We got 9 minutes at the bottom of the hour. So
that's a great point, Tom.
Only kind I make.
Jermaine Matthews get meaningful snaps this week?
Does Jermaine Matthews get meaningful snaps this week? Interestingly, Ryan Day was asked if there was conversations about giving Denzel Burke a series off last week or against Oregon. He said there were, but every decision is about what gives them the best opportunity to win right now. And so they decided not to do it. We talked after the game, probably wouldn't have been a bad idea.
Yeah, I would have probably thought, if you're he sort of settled down later. So that to me suggests it's not that he's incapable of doing this. It's he had a bad couple series. Sometimes you gotta just unplug the thing and wait 30 seconds and plug it back in. If you're getting hit multiple times, to me that's okay. I know what he is normally. For whatever reason, that's not what's happening right now. So yeah, I still tend to think like, hey, have the conversation. Look, you're not getting benched. You're going to go sit for one drive, and then you're going right back in the game. And it's because we believe in your replacement, and that's okay. But we need, ultimately we need you to. I'm turning into coach mode. Ultimately, to be the best team that we can be, we need you to be to be at your best. And right now, we think that just taking a deep breath, go drink some Gatorade, take a deep breath, watch some stuff on the tablet. Let's figure out what's going on, and then go back out there in the drive.
I thought you were going to turn into Ric Flair and say, in order to be the man, you've got to beat the man. To answer the question about Jermaine Matthews, I don't know. Is he going to be? Is he a nickel if Jordan Hancock is playing safety, or do they want to play those corners more? Do they want to rotate more? I don't think it's a bad idea to get Jermaine Matthews on the field more. I just don't know that they will.
Right. And you don't necessarily have a bunch of you're going to be a bunch of 4 wide receiver sets coming up. That's not really what Nebraska does. Penn State, you've got to just focus on stopping the tight end essentially with Penn State. And then you've got Purdue and Northwestern. So that's a month where you're really not going to be seeing a ton of, hey, you're playing a bunch of dime.
I will say, you mentioned throw stuff on the field, throw fans on the field. Jermaine Matthews tweeted out some emojis. Mm-hmm. Is that maybe that is one of those things you can do to also get some extra playing time where you're like, hey, I'm not happy. But then of course after the game, Sunday or whatever, he's all go Bucks, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But clearly there's probably some frustration. He would like to play. I mean, they all talk about how good he is and how much he should be playing. So I don't think a few snaps here or there would hurt. Kevin.
Bucks and Brew. Gut feeling on if Day has nipped the rift between LJ and Jim in the bud. Day seemed pissed today, hoping things actually change and not the same old, same old.
As Day nipped it in the bud between Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles, he seemed pretty upset today, angry. That's per the question. That's not for me. Mm-hmm. I would just say he seemed normally surly. He's been surly before. This is pretty right up there. For one, I don't know what you're talking about. Everybody's on the same page. So, sir, I don't know that. But here's the thing. Assistant coaches can't have egos. And if they do, it's up to the head coach to take it away. And reset everything. And it sure seems like they've had those conversations. And Ryan Day repeatedly said, I know what needs to get done. We're going to get it done. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that. You can't say that if you let what's been going on continue to go on. Whatever it's been. Yeah. You've got to fix it. You've got to change it. You've got to break it so that you can fix it. And then, damn the feelings.
My answer to this question is ask again after the game on Saturday. Yeah. Let's see. I mean,
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, and then I'll say, well, I got to talk. Ryan Day will say I got to go watch the film, and I'll say I got to go talk to Ross, and then and then after that, ask again next Wednesday,
and then perhaps after the Penn State game. Kevin.
Ethan Maxfield, Indiana beat Nebraska by 49. If we don't win by that margin, but show some new stuff on defense, O-line plays good, how will fans react?
So there's a baseline now.
I was about to answer the question, what will it mean? And then you asked a different question.
That's a very good question. How will fans react if Ohio State doesn't beat Nebraska by a similar margin as Indiana, but the offensive line plays well, the defensive line plays well? I think unless there's perfection, you're always going to have some unhappy people. But also, I think a dominating performance, like what's wrong with Oregon's 35-0 win over Purdue? Like it was only 35 points, but it was a dominating performance. You can have a 42-7 dominating thing. You can have a 38-0 that is completely suffocating, where the fourth quarter is just everybody's having sandwiches on the sideline. So I need to see exactly.
They don't have food on the sideline. It's only up on the press box.
Oh, I don't know how the other half lives or could possibly live. But if this is 32-13, I mean, an ugly an ugly score and also an ugly score.
Yeah. Well, which was the year that they wore the black jerseys against Nebraska, and it was 2019. I think it might have been 2018. They wore the black jerseys at home against Nebraska, and I just remember it was just a really ugly game and just really like an unsatisfying win for Ohio State. You don't want that. I think there is, before we get any further in this, I do want to provide some context around Indiana 56, Nebraska 7. Nebraska turned the ball over 5 times. Nebraska went for it on 4th down 5 times and failed to make it a single time. So Indiana was working with short fields a lot.
That's 10 turnovers essentially.
Essentially 10 turnovers. And, this is, I can't give Matt Rule any crap for that, because Matt Rule was playing to win, and he talked about it in his press conference. Playing to win, you can punt and play field position and keep the score more reasonable. It was 14-7 Indiana with like 5 minutes left in the first half. So that was not really, this was not a 56-7 game like the 2021 Ohio State-Michigan State game. This was 56-7, like one half was close and then one half was not.
Yeah.
It was, what was the Akron game? It was close at the beginning of at halftime, it was 17-3 or whatever. And then Ohio State pulled away and everyone kind of went, well, it wasn't really. I feel like a lot of the context, a lot of the talk around 56-7 this week has not really taken the full context of that game into account.
I would also say just win the game because you've got a bigger game coming up the week after. Once this game is over, it's not Penn State week. The Penn State game is on the horizon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Penn State could, if they somehow manage to win at Camp Randall, I believe it's a night game. If they manage to win that one, they're going to be at least number 3 in the country. So that's going to take over any kind of consternation about not winning by as much as you'd like against Nebraska. And whatever they win by, it's still going to be much better than a loss. Kevin?
Bucktown bully. Is the DL issue is it coaching or player problem?
Well, is it coaching or player problem? Ryan Day was kind of asked about that, and he said scheme and coaching.
Yeah.
He said we've got the players. It's scheme and coaching. So you change those things. They've got the players in the right spots, do they believe? So you ask them to do different things. You put them in different positions to do those things, and you go from there.
Next up.
Last one I have put away, Market X. If we need more pass rush, could we see C.J. Hicks basically as an extra rush man help? I know the Barron Browning connection has been made before.
Tom, if Ohio State needs an extra pass rusher, could we finally see C.J. Hicks more involved in that role?
You certainly could. I think you maybe run into an issue where if he does the one thing, this is his thing, and every time they talk about him, they talk about, boy, he's really good at this one thing. You can't just do the one thing, because then it becomes very predictable that, hey, there's this guy here. It's a 5th guy. Guess what he's going to do? He's going to be rushing because that's what he does. You have to be a little bit more unpredictable. I do think you could see him in certain situations. I don't know who you're taking off the field in a rushman type situation, but could you put him out there in, with the rushman package as a 5th guy? You could. I think they feel pretty good about Jack Sawyer. They feel pretty good about JT Tuimoloau. Tyleik Williams, they're not putting out there just to save snaps, essentially. Mitchell Melton, I think they feel pretty good about. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry. I mean, these guys have had reasonable pass rush success in obvious pass rush situations where you're getting pressure. So, I know the easy answer is, well, who are you taking off the field? And I don't know that there's an easy answer to that necessarily, but could he be part of the solution? Sure, absolutely.
I think probably one of the answers is you take one of the linebackers off the field and you just rush him.
Yeah.
That's whether it's Cody Simon or Sonny Styles. We know they rotate the linebackers anyway. Arvell Reese hasn't been playing as much.
No.
We might start seeing him more involved, but if they're okay rotating that way, then I don't think they'd have a problem rotating with Hicks as a pass rusher linebacker package, presuming he's shown a propensity to make plays in practice. And they've talked about that in the past. I know he can really do this well, but we're not seeing necessarily the evidence of that in games. And they've blitzed him some when he's been in there. But if they're looking for things to do, that's one of them. But it starts with doing something different with the defensive line. That's, to me, the focus right now.
Yeah, I think that's number one. I don't think you're going to see him added as a defensive end. I don't think you're pulling Jack Sawyer or JT Tuimoloau off the field to put him on there. And I know we've heard a lot of things and a lot of, like the very specific same answer from Jim Knowles on things. But there's a little bit of watch what they do, not what they say. And what they've been doing is he's sort of been, it feels like sliding down the ladder, the pecking order at linebacker a little bit, where you've got Cody Simon, you've got Sonny Styles, you've got Arvell Reese. Now he's maybe more fourth in that order in terms of the number of snaps he's been getting in some recent games. And that, to me, suggests that they don't necessarily feel like he can do everything. Right. He can do the things that they talk about him doing all the time. But if they don't feel like he can do all of the things, then that is going to limit the number of situations in which he can do those things.
Yeah, but I mean, don't be surprised by, I guess, anything you see this week. Expect some new things, and if you notice it, like, oh, hey, success, or hey, we're trying something different. At least be happy with that, and of course, we'll see how it goes. You're playing a true freshman quarterback who can swing it around and run around, but they're more than just the quarterback. So we will definitely talk more about the Nebraska game moving forward this week in every show we do. So before we go, if you could hit the thumbs up, we would appreciate that. Hit the bell to be notified when we go live like we have now. Of course, subscribe to the channel. That would be great. And continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Subscribe there, where subscribe for monthly. The first month right now, $4.99. Go ahead and jump on that one. We'd appreciate you seeing you over there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.